Ashley, so nice to have you here.
I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you.
Of course, I've always enjoyed our conversations. For those who do not know, I've known Ashley for over 10 years now, and we met in yoga. I can date it because my son was 1 years old during my yoga training.
Wow. Wow. I couldn't imagine going through that with a 1-year-old. Good for you for making that a priority. Wow.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was an interesting period. But Ashley, since we accomplished our yoga training together. You've gone on to do so many interesting things, and I've had you in the past, but you've actually transitioned even more recently, and I just love the transitions. I don't think they're necessarily like these hard transitions. I think it's an evolution of who you are. So maybe you could share with the audience the period where you were focused on what I call the courage coaching,
Mm,
and now
yeah.
where you're at, and what was the catalyst behind that one?
Yeah. I love the way that you described it because I believe in that so deeply. I think us as women and as human beings, I think every single day we are growing and changing and evolving. And so, yeah, these different phases and aspects of our business really are evolutions of ourselves. I initially, though, my like foundation in being an entrepreneur was as a photographer. I had such the incredible honor of doing that for about a decade. And about 8 years into doing that, I really was being called to something so much deeper. I wanted to really sit in space in a really intentional way with women. But I, of course, didn't know what at the time initially. And then I was so weird about like, what do you call it? Do I do like mentorships? Like, am I a coach? Like, what is it? And so ultimately, after quite a bit of exploration, I found myself really connecting with what I had called courage coaching, because something that I had realized is a common denominator that was intertwined in all of my life was like all of the actions and steps of my life was this ability to really leap and take chances and jump and do things that were like to probably like a little insane, like not typical things that people would do. And so I just really loved the qualities and the energy behind courage and it being a catalyst to really have the confidence within the self to be able to act in a way that was either outside of yourself or contradictory to what society it tells you to do or wants of you, et cetera, et cetera. And I had the most beautiful opportunity to run everything through the lens of courage for a few years. My coaching was called Courage Coaching. My podcast was called the Living Courageously podcast. And it was such a gift because I had this incredible opportunity to co-create with women and then interview women all through the lens of courage. And everyone defining courage, and completely no two people define courage as the same thing. But ultimately, what I started to realize is as my business started to grow and as I really started to give more offerings, um, I had a lot of pushback from clients or potential clients being like, well, I'm not courageous. Well, I would never just jump out of a plane. I would never just move to another country. I wouldn't just go move my whole family to another city. And what I had noticed was this languaging around courage being this big life altering decision and choice. And the more that I got that feedback, I became so grateful because that was actually the complete opposite of how I was holding space and the types of conversations that I was having and the programs I was running my clients through. And really, what I was ultimately doing was creating space for women to get really curious about themselves, to get really curious about what their values are and what they value about life and what they love and what fills up their cup and what does success mean to them? And all of these things that, yes, maybe being courageous is a value, but ultimately at the end of the day, it was about just getting really, really curious on their lives and how to live that much more aligned, that much more intentional, that much more honoring of who they are, the dreams that they have, and then how to take these small steps to get there. And so in April, I believe, of this past year, I had the incredible honor. I get really loud downloads from the universe. It's something I'm very grateful for. I hid it for a while because sounded a little bit weird, but I get really loud voices. Sometimes I get really good images. And I just got what I call one of my downloads, where it was so unbelievably clear that it was time to rebrand into intentional living, because really ultimately what I was doing was helping women and really supporting women and being way more intentional about who they are, about their life, and ultimately what they want. And so now everything is done through the lens of intentionality. So intentional living coaching, my podcast is called Living an Intentional Life. So it's really, how do we get so intentional about who we are, what we want, why we want it, and then take small actionable steps to get there.
And the other day, I heard someone talk about courage on another podcast, and they said something like, it doesn't have to be this big monumental thing. It could be sometimes because of the conditions or context of your life, just getting out of bed, which I'm not saying that should necessarily be the goal or intention, but it still helps. Now, I feel like the stepping stone, so to speak, for the
Mm,
courage, a bigger acts in our life, is to first know ourselves. Maybe you
mm.
could start with that and share a little bit about that journey that someone would take with you so that they gain that clarity. Because not everyone is raised knowing what intentionality is.
Yeah, yeah. I love that so much. So the foundation of the work that I do, regardless of what program my clients are in, I'm so grateful to have so many different options for the different types of clients that come into my world. But ultimately, where everything starts is through what I call creating a heart-centered foundation. So really creating this foundation of ourselves, but not from a mind perspective, from a heart perspective. Like, what is your heart ultimately? Like, what is it telling you? And so how I do that is we literally move through a series of questions. And I can even send you a link to do a free download. But the questions are, what are your values? So what are these qualities that like you really, really are attracted to in life? What do you value about life? So the difference of that is like, what are these experiences that you're drawn to? These types of things that like really like you crave and you want and you carve out space and time for. What do you love? What are the things that literally just like make your heart burst? What inspires you? So those types of things that like, when you are like hearing a conversation or you read a book or you're listening to a podcast and you kind of get this like switch that turns on where it's like, oh, I want to know more about that. What are you curious about? What fills up your cup? So really, what are those moments where you just feel so full in the best of ways? And then ending ultimately with, what does success mean to you? Because the reason why I asked that question, even though it's very different, success is very different from a like just like it's very different than values, but yet if the values is the heartbeat behind what we do, the success is the why behind what we do. It is so important that we understand, why are we doing what we are doing? Why is what we're doing, like, why does it matter? Why do we want this? And so when we create the space and time to actually sit down and define what success means to us in this moment, because when I did this exercise 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, even 1 year ago, my definition of success was so completely different, because again, where this conversation started is we're constantly evolving. We're constantly growing and changing. So that is where really I start all the time, is creating that heart-centered foundation, because then what you can start to do is really evaluate, okay, these are my values. Am I making decisions on a daily basis that is in honor of these values, or have I gone so far outside of myself and away from myself that these literally are my values, but like I don't even practice a single one of them. And I say this from a place of just pure inquisitiveness and curiosity, not judgment. Because the most profound thing and the most beautiful thing that we can do for ourselves is be honest. The more honest that we are, the more that we can actually start to see where and how we want to make changes and transitions in our lives. Another question that I really get super curious about with like someone wanting to understand who they are is, who are you when no one is looking? What are the types of things that you gravitate towards? What's the type of music you listen to? Like, what are the things that you're being pulled to when no one else is around? Because that is such a deep insight of like your truest desires versus expectations or the supposed tos or the shoulds or the need to. It actually is, what is your heart calling?
And you touched upon something there that I deeply resonate with, and the word is authenticity. To remain authentic not only in our professional lives and personal, so it's the same soul, so to speak, that you're meeting, because there are different cultures and different cultures. Like I can say, being raised in a fairly orthodox Indian culture, there were certain expectations on how you arrive and show up. And like you were saying, are you going to behave that way when you are alone?
Mhm.
And I think that um, I level of curiosity is something I've been constantly. Sorry, I'm losing my voice today. I'm constantly going through, and the reason being is that um, when I went through my corporate journey and left, one of my whys was I don't want to have different personalities, and I've always been pushing the envelope, or what would they call the black sheep when it comes to the Indian culture, because I wanted to just be me,
Mm.
agnostic to the culture. But that also was triggered in my corporate life, which is why I'm where I'm at. So I think the heart of what that means is authenticity. And that's really difficult for a lot of people.
Yeah, I hear that so much. I actually it was nonprofit, but that was where my background had started as well. And there was a really loud moment when it was actually before I met you in yoga teacher training, where I realized, I asked myself, and it was so loud. Again, I get these downloads where it was like, are you just existing? Meaning, are you just going through the motions and the shoulds and the supposed tos of life? Are you actually living? And it was the first time that I can consciously remember really asking myself, what am I doing? Because something felt out of alignment. And so, why I share that is because when there's something that feels out of alignment, when you feel like you walk into a room and you have to put on one mask, and then you walk out of that room and you have to put on another mask, and then you walk into your house and you have to put on another mask, there is a huge disconnect going on. And so, the better that we can understand who we are, the more that we can cultivate a relationship with our heart and like the messagings and the knowings of our heart, the more that we can we start to, I think a few things start to simultaneously happen. I think we start to build trust within ourselves because we start to get to know ourselves better. We start to build and strengthen an intuitive muscle because we're trusting ourselves, because we're knowing ourselves. But then we also start living life just naturally in this authentic way because we trust ourselves. We're learning to listen to our intuition, which is that like nudge or gut feeling that happens inside of us, and we're getting to know ourselves. And so then it's like, I believe so deeply that once we know something, we can't unknow it. So it's like the more that we can spend with ourselves and know, who am I at my core? Who am I when no one is watching? Like, who am I when everything else is shut out? Then we can start to live more and more and more authentically because we know who we are.
And Ashley, on that topic of authenticity and knowing who we are. Can you talk about the concept of flow? And I'm going somewhere with this, but I feel like they're so interconnected.
This is really interesting. Um, the concept of flow in what sense? Just like flowing with life and workspaces, or
Let me put it this way. This just came to me as you were talking. Maybe it's because I know you for all these years. When you mentioned that quote and that hit you had, like, who are you? Or I forget the way you phrased it, but I
are
believe
you
it's
yeah, are you just existing? Or are you actually living?
yes. When you said that, it reminded me of because I read that in your book
Mm,
a few years back.
yeah.
The my personal hit that came in my mind is you've always struck me as somebody who may have already understood that on a very deeply intuitive level because photography was so you and still is so you, but you have this deep innate gift of the lens of life and seeing the color, seeing the truth, and living the truth in alignment with your heart space. And so the natural evolution to go from inquisitiveness of courage to now arriving at taking that tool, I think it was meant to be to go from courage to intentionality. And the
Yeah.
reason I mentioned the word flow is that when you talked about having these downloads, I think the more you're in alignment, you are in flow, so to speak.
Mhm. Yeah, I resonate with that so deeply. When I think of the word flow, all I can visualize is dance. Like flowing with life is literally learning to dance with life. There are moments where you are just like so angelic and whimsical and like on top of your mountain, and like the breeze is blowing your hair and it's just like serene and picturesque. But then there are these moments of life where it is you are so far in a cave and so disconnected from like that dance and expression of yourself. And flow to me is learning how do you allow yourself to dance through life, honoring the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, honoring the incredible like peaks of your mountain ridge and the treacherous like valleys, like honoring the polarities that are our lives. And so I think for me personally, the way that I've been able to flow and dance with life is I give myself permission and grace for the humanness that I am and we all are. Because every single one of us, we have days where it's like we feel like we can take on the world. And we have days where it's like, please do not ask me another question. Like, I don't want to leave my house. Is it okay to just put on another movie? And so the more that we can honor that, like, we are dynamic beings that need different things on different days and at different stages of our lives. I know for me, it's given me permission to just like dance my dance and walk my walk, knowing that, like, you know what? Today isn't the best day, but I know that I did the best that I could. And then on days where I'm like, I feel like I have everything to give and I have all the energy to just capitalize on that. So I guess so I live life through questions. Like that is how I like function and how I like live so deeply. So my question to the listeners would be is like, how do you get to know your dance? And how do you give yourself, like, what is it that you can do to give yourself full permission to dance in whatever expression you are in this moment? And then take it by the next moment and the next moment and the next moment. And for me, that's ultimately what has allowed me to flow with life.
You mentioned the word grace, and as we both agree, we're um, evolving. I feel like I'm not the same girl I was 10 years ago, but my heart is the same, but it's still constantly growing. And my personal, what do you call it, shadow or challenge is
Yeah.
giving myself grace. And
Mm,
yesterday, something came up, and maybe you and I can go a little deeper on that topic, is I was going through a set of um, inquiry questions with my coach,
Mm,
and my, I would say, shadow self is that while I'm really good at being super focused, and sometimes I go into overdrive, that overdrive is also my shadow self.
mm,
Then I won't give myself grace. And that is challenging for, I would say, men and women. But tell me more about how you were able to come to that level of, I would say, compassionate understanding that it's
mm.
okay to give yourself grace.
Yeah, yeah. I really love that you shared that awareness that you have about the shadow side, because I think that there is so much power in knowing what that shadow side is for us. Like for me, that for me is the not enough story. Not pretty enough, not good enough, not smart enough, not, not cool enough, whatever the enough story is, that's always been my shadow side. And so beautiful, beautiful way to lead by example of like, let's be on, again, it goes back to what I said, like the more that you can be honest with yourself, the more that you can start to understand what to do with that information. And so that's really where I feel like I've been able to be compassionate and graceful with myself, was because for me, that shadow side was the not enough story. And the more that I started to understand, okay, if that is my shadow side, why? Why is that present? And like, there's a really cool exercise I call the why exercise. I don't know what it's actually called, but it's like, if for me, I'll use me not being enough is my shadow side. It's like, I don't feel enough. Why don't you feel enough? Well, I don't feel enough because I just had 3 connection calls last week with potential clients and none of them signed. Well, why? And so just keep digging down into the why to get to the root of what that belief or that thought is. Um, and the more that I did that for me and my life in general, the more that I could understand how rooted this not enough story is in me, that I've been carrying it through what I know this entire lifetime. I don't know about past lifetimes. Um, and it just goes back to, once you know something, you can't unknow it. And so in knowing that, I think ultimately, really, in knowing that, I was really able, that coupled with creating that heart-centered foundation, getting really clear on who I am, getting really clear on what success means to me, deepening that muscle of trust and intuition, like all of that coupled then with this deep awareness, I think it really led me to honoring myself moment by moment by moment. One of the things that I'm constantly asking myself is, did I do the best that I could in that moment with the tools that I had? And if I answer yes, then it's like I have to accept that and move forward. If the answer is no, then that's where curiosity comes in again. And it's like, okay, well, what tool would be more supportive? What could I do differently next time? And so I started adding that into my practice, which again fed back into the trust and the intuition of like 9 out of 10 times I really was doing the best that I could in that moment with the tools and resources that I had. And then the times where I wasn't, that was when I started to like, okay, like, is there a new podcast I need to find? Is there a book? Is there a seminar I need to go to? Like, what is this thing that like I'm craving? And the other thing that oddly, I don't know, like that has helped me in particular with, it all feeds in back to trusting myself and having compassion for myself, is I really do, I identify seasons a lot. And it's not just seasons like as in summer, winter, spring, and fall. Um, it is seasons as in, what is the season of life that you are in right now? And then is there a time frame on this season? Is this season a month long? Is it 3 months long? Is it 6 months long? Like, how long is it? Um, and what is it that you want or need in this season? What are your intentions behind it? What is your why behind it? And the more that I have been able to break down life into these smaller bite-sized pieces and understanding what is right now isn't always going to be. And it's like if this season that I'm in is a hard season and I'm giving myself 2 months to kind of sit with this and be a little more gentle with myself, then it's like for me, the way that I work with my brain and my heart and function is like, okay, I've given myself 2 months. My deadline is, let's say, January 17th, to just be with what is. And so because I'm someone who is so goal oriented, it's helpful to have that end date. So I'm like, I can just relax into this season, knowing that this season will end. It's why for me, it's like I love birthdays. I love the new year. Like I love quarter check-in points. Like I love these points because it's an opportunity to be like, okay, is this season going to continue on or can we close this season? And so I know that's a little like right field, but it really helps me kind of break down life so that I can give myself more compassion. I can be more graceful with myself because I know that it's not going to be forever.
That is so beautifully expressed. My mom would often refer to a song. It's I don't know, from the 60s or 70s. Um, there's how does I wish I remembered the words, but something about seasons, and it's a classic. And she would often say, "Oh, there are just so many different seasons to life," and to be honest, at times, um, it felt sad, and I don't know why, but it triggered some level of sadness because I I feel like I'm a different person now than when she would say this to me. By the time I kept thinking, I don't have clarity on
Mm,
what that's the the end will be. What is the purpose? And I think the word trust comes to mind when you were talking about seasons. That, like you said, you allow yourself grace. Let's say it's a dark winter season. Allow yourself grace. And I'm just now learning to recognize that. Like I recently did a podcast on journey.
mm,
The evolution of creating this business called Omni Mindfulness has been a journey. It's been painful. I've
yeah.
struggled. And I thought it was a reflection on me
Mm,
until I realized it's a season. And the thing that triggered my mind when you talked about seasons is the word trust comes to mind. That
mm,
if you're doing everything you believe are the right things to do based on the tools you have,
yeah.
and if you're asking all the right questions like you have, then trust that you can release the outcome
Yeah. Yeah.
and have that trust. And how have you developed this trust?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I've really developed this trust through going back to all the tools that I've already shared. I am really, really honest with what I need to be able to recharge. I spend a lot of time walking and in nature. The more that this sounds kind of mean, but the more that I've shut out the outside world, the more that I have understood my inside world, and the more that I've then been able to really strengthen and develop that muscle of trust because I've understood me without these outside factors. It's like, I'll never forget when I went to Tanzania the first time. I was only like 25 years old. I was super young, but one of the most profound things about it was for the first time in my life, I didn't have the car that defined me. I didn't get to wear the clothes that I typically did. I didn't have my house. I didn't have my friends. Like I didn't have all of these things that I had thought had defined me. And it was such a like before and after moment where I was like, who am I when none of those things are present? And again, going back to how we started the beginning of this conversation of why I do everything through the lens of intentionality and not courage is, do I believe you need to go to Tanzania to do that? Absolutely not. Can you make micro adjustments in your everyday life to start to remove yourself from everything that kind of defines you, your house, your friends, the clothes that you wear? Like, can you just go sit out in nature? Like, can you build in this space and quiet time And that's really what I've done. I mean, I feel so blessed that we live in an area that supports that so much. We live up in the mountains and are surrounded by forest and nature and trees. And it's no coincidence we're here. It's one of the greatest gifts. And so it really, the trust has come through getting to really know myself and sitting with myself. And then, to be honest with you, it has also come through not hiding myself. For so long, I played small and I hid areas of myself, my spiritual side, my intuitive side, my like, I get some pretty loud nudges from the universe side, my ability to hear voices and see images at times. Like, I wouldn't talk about that or share that for so long because I didn't want to be seen as the weird one or like, oh, Ashley's gone off the rails or whatever it may be. And the more that I started to really trust myself and sit with myself, the more that I gained the confidence and the courage and the desire to share it out in the world. And what has been so beautiful is because I believe in myself and I trust myself, I then share it. And then the like mirrored reflection back from the safe people in my life, my clients, my community. Like I even was on a coaching call yesterday and I pull oracle cards for my clients sometimes. And I got a really loud nudge to do it for my one client. And it was unbelievable what the card was and what the message was. And she kind of looked at me and she goes, "Do you do this for all your clients?" Like the message literally was like, you could have plucked her right into the card and it was her life. And I was like, yeah, like I have this incredible gift to like tune into people's energies. And that in and of itself then strengthens that trust because for me, I'm someone that like I thrive in shared experiences. I thrive in community. I believe that we are stronger together. Like I believe that we're meant to do life together and not to do life alone. That being said, I do need a lot of time by myself to recharge. But, and so that helped strengthen the trust muscle. So I really think though that it starts with shutting out outside so that you can start to understand the inner landscape of your being. And then from there, the more that you understand yourself and trust yourself, the more that you can start to share it when and where it feels safe. And then what's beautiful is the mirror will come back and reflect that, which then it creates this incredible cyclical nature where like it strengthens and then you share it some more and it strengthens. And then there's the moments too, though, where you share it and like you get a response that like may knock you off your rocker, but like I believe those are moments of deep learning lessons, moments of coming back to your core of what your truths are and what your beliefs are, and then going back out there again.
And sometimes going back out there again for, I'm not going to speak for myself, but at times having been a soul that often felt shy. And I
Mm,
don't say shy as in, I feel like I have got the courage to talk, say, on a podcast, but
yeah,
shy as in, I don't want to have those deeper wounds by judgment or being misunderstood or, uh, I don't know, being seen through a lens that is not accurate. And so
yeah,
sometimes I've withdrawn from society many times. And when I reemerge, I feel like I'm a little bit stronger because I finally have had the courage to reemerge.
yeah, yeah. I can really resonate with what you're saying. And the thing that is so profound about the power behind getting to know yourself is the ability to then unapologetically be that person out in the world. And the people that are for you and vibrate on a similar frequency and see you for your heart, it is unbelievable the depth and strength of connection that happens. And the people who don't will fall away. And it's not good or bad. And bless them as they move on their journey. But it's honestly one of the greatest gifts that I think we can all do for ourselves and for society is support where it feels supportive and gently bless your, it's like, that's not my thing, but you do you, you know? And I just think the more that we honor who we are and hold space for people to be who they are, I think our world would be a hell of a lot different. And there'd be a lot more love and connection and openness and peace. And so I know that's the reason why I'm so passionate about this work is the more that I stay committed to understanding who I am at my heart and my core. It's the Marianne Williamson poem. You know, it's like the more that you shine your light, you give others permission to do the same. And I literally live my life by that. And so I just encourage any of the women listening. It's like, what if you can start small? I literally, small intentional action every single day compounds to major change, transformation, and the realization of your dreams. Start small. Strength, like do one thing different today to build that trust muscle, one thing different tomorrow, and one thing different the next day. And then it will start to build. And then the beautiful thing about time is before you know it, those small things become the big things, which then become these incredibly profound changes and transformations that enable you to go out in the world and not play small and fully be unapologetically you.
And I know we're going to wrap up soon. I hope I can bring you back because I just so love everything you said. You had me in tears. Um, One thing you said really, God, I had goosebumps just when you said it. Like I felt like this energy charge go up my spine. I was talking to someone about a year ago on my podcast, and later he wanted to just give me some free consulting feedback. So we were chatting after we were done recording, and after he asked some key questions, he's like, "You've been playing small." And at
Mm,
first, I took that as an insult, like, "Ugh." But then I realized it's an evolution. What I might have shown up as a couple of years ago, or when I was in corporate, versus now is different. I now very much what you were saying, unapologetically remain as authentic, but that authenticity is constantly getting more refined. But
mhm.
I encourage people to realize that you're so much more than you realize. And like you
Yeah.
said, the small steps, right?
Yeah. It really is. It's small steps. And I mean, and going back to like, we're so much more than we realize is like each and every one of us have such unique gifts that only we possess. Each and every one of us like are capable of way more than we ever give ourselves credit for. And it is so unbelievable what starts to happen when you start to believe in yourself. And then, like energy attracts like energy. And then you attract people into your life who then believe in you. And then it inspires them to believe in themselves. And it's so beautiful. Like, then these things that feel so big are so like natural. Um, and every day I'm so grateful for the work that I get to do for the women that I call it co-creating because I'm far from just holding a space. It is the most beautiful thing that happens. But it's because every day I am witness to the infinite possibility that each and every one of us in life really is. And yes, it's hard. And yes, there are some seasons where you're like, I'm done. I give up. Like I'm tired. Like I can't do this, you know? That's the cyclical nature of life. But the most beautiful thing is I believe that every single one of us has everything that we need already within us. It's just the matter of asking questions and being in safe spaces to pull it out. And when it starts to come out, and we start to take our power back and we start to live our life in complete alignment with our values and with our truth, we can literally do anything.
Ashley, this was so inspiring. And you were speaking my language, and it's like what you were talking about, like attracts like. I think it you also raise the vibration, the collective vibration of others. So on that note, Ashley, I wish you nothing but success, and I sincerely hope we can go deeper on any one of these topics in the future.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to connect and share in this way. And it has me emotional right now because it is so beautiful when we're granted opportunities to kind of pull ourselves out of our life and like actually look at our life. And sometimes when we're in the day to day, it can just feel hard or mundane or long or whatever the energy is. But when we have these opportunities to kind of pull ourselves out and look at life from a 360-degree, it's like we are magical and life is magical, all like with it all, with the extremes. So I'm just deeply grateful for the opportunity to be able to just connect and share in this way. And thank you. Thank you.
Of course, it's been my pleasure and honor. And Ashley, your the show notes will indicate how people can find you, but remind us again of your current podcast name.
Yeah. So my podcast, I'm the two places I hang out most is my podcast called Living an Intentional Life Podcast. You can literally get it on all places you find your podcast. A new episode comes out every Tuesday. And the other place that I hang out a lot is Instagram. And my Instagram handle is at Ashley Strong Smith _.
Lovely, Ashley. Have a wonderful day. I hope you have a great weekend ahead.
Yeah, thank you. You as well.